From Savitri, Book 1, The Secret Knowledge. Thus will the Mass Transcendent mount his throne, when darkness deepens, strangling the earth's breast, and man's corporeal mind is the only lamp. As a thief's in the night shall be the covert tread of one who steps unseen into his house. A voice ill heard shall speak, the soul obey, a power into mind's inner chambers steal. A charm and sweetness open life's closed doors, and beauty conquer the resisting world. The truth light capture nature by surprise. A stealth of God compel the heart to bliss, and earth grow unexpectedly divine. In matter shall be lit the spirit's glow. In body and body kindle the sacred birth. Night shall awake to the anthem of the stars. The days become a happy pilgrim march, our will a force of the eternal's power, and thought the rays of the spiritual sun. The few shall see what none yet understands. God shall grow up while the wise men talk and sleep. For man shall not know the coming till its hour, and belief shall be naught till the work is done.
Vanya, one of the young readers of Savitri. She's all of 16 and she's reading Savitri in the school. We read it together, this wonderful book called Savitri. I'm going to request the one person in this room who has had the incredible grace of seeing Sri Aurobindo, being blessed by Sri Aurobindo, and one of our youngest Aurovillians, Aster Patel.
My back to everyone. Yeah. Forgive me for taking this help physically, but I'm not running around physically as I used to, and as I think most of you are familiar with. You know, it's been a surprise to me that the fourth issue of this journal is being released today. A bit of the history, because like everything in our lives and our adventure of consciousness has a history and a long time to work out. It was somewhere in the centenary of Sri Aurobindo, 1972, that a few of us, and the great push was given by Sri Prem Malik, who was one of the pioneers in Aurobindo, that we should create a journal that should present Sri Aurobindo's work to the country, to India. And he asked the mother for a name for the journal. And the mother gave the name Bhavishyate, which means towards the future. Well, the future in the divine vision is another time dimension. And the journal never took off this is not working. The journal never took off for the centenary year in 1972. It so happens that the journal is taken out now in the last few years with this fourth issue by the efforts of Deepti. So I would like to remember in these years the initial push by Chief Prem Malik, whom most people here know about his work in Orwell, and the fact that this journal with its contents is relevant to our situation in Orwell and in the country and in the world as of now. And this is the 150th anniversary. But it's a lovely surprise to hold this in my hand and to be able to release it to somebody who's going to talk more about it.
The first two journals were released by Dr. Karan Singh while he was the chairman. And it's fitting that Asta did the next two. She did number 3 and number 4, which are directly connected to Auroville. And so we have our young Aurovillian, Dr. Asta Patel, releasing the journal. Thank you. Thank you, Asta.
Window works on us in all these years. But something which was the first was in 1972 for the 100th and centenary year of Sri Aurobindo. And it is good at this moment to remember how much has grown and developed here. And first of all, I would like to say a few words, if I may be permitted that time, about Mata Mandir. I cannot think in all my travels, which have been quite extensive, when people from so many countries have worked physically with their hands for 40 years to create something that is a symbol of a new consciousness. To work physically in matter by the whole world to create something which is a new experience of consciousness given to the world. And that is something that somehow stands as one of the great events of the time that has gone. And it is good somehow to remember that the span of time as a human being sees it is not the same as the span of time that the divine sees in our change of consciousness and experience. Thank you, Deepti, for this work. And now it's all yours to share.
Asta and I have an old association. I first came when I was Mania's age, actually. And so that's also symbolic. And I had Mother's darshan thanks to my father. He gave us a special darshan as a family because we were coming from the 1971 war. And I met Asta then. So we've known each other a long time.
We've all known each other a long time.
Yes, that's true. It's a millennial connection.
It's not for nothing that Mother has said repeatedly that, look, you come together in many lives to do a work for the divine. This is not the first time that we've come together, and it is not by chance. It's not by chance. And by all together, it means really all together.
On the 9th of December, 1950, Mother gave this message, which is now to be seen at the Samadhi. To thee, who has been the material envelope of our Master, to thee, our infinite gratitude. Before thee, who has done so much for us, who hast worked, struggled, suffered, hoped, endured so much, before thee, who hast willed all, attempted all, prepared, achieved all for us. Before thee we bow down, and implore that we may never forget, even for a moment, all we owe to thee. This is a celebration of that birth 150 years ago that brought this being into manifestation and definitely changed the world forever, even though the signs of this change are not yet fully visible. No one knows Sri Aurobindo. No one is an expert on Sri Aurobindo. Much is said about Sri Aurobindo these days, but really, we have no understanding of who he is. He is the future, Mother says, marching towards its realization. In 1972, it was kind of the first time when the ashram was going out into the world, presenting what Sri Aurobindo represented. And at that time, some of the people in the ashram, Kirit Bhai and others, were putting together a sort of a history of India, history of Sri Aurobindo. And they tended to present Sri Aurobindo as a culmination of human history. And her response was very strong. No, 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 she said. Sri Aurobindo doesn't belong to history. Sri Aurobindo is not a teaching. He's not a revelation. He's a decisive action direct from the Supreme. So what are we talking about? How dare I stand in front of you and talk about Sri Aurobindo? Well, actually, I'm not talking about Sri Aurobindo, even though I am trying to find his words, because it is only through his words that we can find Auroville. So actually, what I'm trying to do with these journals is explore Auroville. Why Auroville? What is this collective experiment? Why are we here? What are the conditions that we need to meet? What are the conditions that we need to fulfill? To get any understanding of that, we have to turn towards the mother. She has said much more. It's so much easier to understand Sri Aurobindo through the mother. So I want to say straight away that I have gathered a selection of Sri Aurobindo's remarks, and it is in my quest to understand Auroville, its meaning and purpose. Somebody else might make another selection. There is a whole library of books that Sri Aurobindo has written. Anything you put together about him is not good enough, because he's more than that. He's much more than anything any one of us could say. And people are saying a lot these days. Sometimes I don't recognize who they're talking about, because it doesn't seem to be the Sri Aurobindo that I have been in contact with for these last 50 odd years. So who is this Sri Aurobindo? And what has he brought to the world? There is a line in Savitri. He saw the footsteps of the undreamed idea in the far avenues of the beyond. So we're looking at the future. He is seeing ideas that do not have a body on earth. He is trying to bring into the present what might take us thousands of years, and with a lot of setbacks. Well, we can see that the setbacks continue. But the only word that we can turn to and find solutions in, and I think in some ways the time spirit is telling us, somebody asked Mother, how do I get wisdom? She said, read Sri Aurobindo. And so I think we are being told in Auroville, read Sri Aurobindo. Actually, I am exploring the soul of a collective yoga. I want to read to you some of the things he says. And he's saying this in 1918. This is in the period when he's writing all his texts to do with the Arya. A collective yoga is not like a solitary one. It's this little quote down there. A collective yoga is not like a solitary one. It is not free from collective influences. It has a collective soul, which cannot afford to be in some parts either raw or rotten. That's a stern warning from Sri Aurobindo for us in this collective experiment. It's a collective yoga, which means it has a collective soul, and it cannot afford division. It cannot afford to exclude anything. This experiment is an experiment in inclusivity. So it's a strong message. He also says, and I'm reading that little quote above, but we are the pioneers, hewing our way through the jungle of the lower Prakriti. It will not do for us to be cowards and shirkers and refuse the burden, to clamor for everything to be made quick and easy for us. Above all things, I demand from you endurance, firmness, heroism, the true spiritual heroism. I want strong men. I do not want emotional children. So in some ways, the time spirit is demanding that we grow up fast. And then he also, these are all, I'm quoting letters from his early letters. This is 1918, all these 3 letters, which tend not to get highlighted so much, even though I think we are exactly in the same situation 100 years later. You must not expect a sudden collective miracle. I have not come here to accomplish miracles, but to show, lead the way, help on the road to a great inner change of our human nature. The outer change in the world is only possible if and when that inner transmutation is effected and extends itself. So again, squarely, it's an inner change that Aurobindo is calling for. No outward socio-political devices can make Aurobindo come into manifestation. It has to be a growth of consciousness. If we are speaking about the Aurobindo that Sri Aurobindo and Mother want, certainly without a growth of consciousness, that Aurobindo cannot be. Can we go to the beginning now? She says, Sri Aurobindo does not belong to the past nor to history. Sri Aurobindo is the future advancing towards its realization. Thus, we must shelter the eternal youth required for a speedy advance in order not to become laggards on the way. My sense has been that if we do not make the progress in the time when we are supposed to make the progress, then it gets harder. It gets more difficult. There are what Sri Aurobindo talks about, hours of God. And if you miss that moment, then it's a long journey. And in some ways, Aurobindo is doing that a little bit because we are not following the one rule that we should. That's what Manya read. Actually, I'm beginning with this quote, which is on page 55. And I'm also ending with this about God growing up. It's a dream. But he saw this dream and he tried to pull it into manifestation. In fact, his last testament that he gave to India was about dreams. So Sri Aurobindo was a great dreamer. So was Mother. I mean, why would Aurobindo even come to birth if they did not have these incredible dreams of the future? If we go to the next page. Yes. So I want to see the footsteps of an undreamed idea. It's really interesting what happens with the Arya. It's launched by Paul Richard, at that time Mira Alfasa and Sri Aurobindo. The war gets declared almost soon after, and Sri Aurobindo is left with a magazine that he has to produce every month, 75 pages. And that's where he serializes all his great writings, which, by the way, later he calls a compromise that he's not prepared to recommit speaking to the mind. He doesn't want to speak to the mind. Look at us. We are so full of our minds and our self-important knowingness. Sri Aurobindo doesn't want to speak to our minds. there is a clear difference between speaking to the mind and speaking to the soul. The language of Sri Aurobindo and Mother is always, always, always speaking to the soul. So if our souls are in front, we hear the voice, otherwise we don't. I'm just going to read you some of the things he says about the Arya. What he says about the Arya. The object of the Arya is to feel out the thought of the future, to help shape its foundation, and to link it to the best and most vital thought of the past. If you look at our charter, bridge between the past and the future, here, Mother has encapsulated Sri Aurobindo's yoga in the 4 points of the charter. Then he says some more. This is available in, I think in Essays, Human and Divine, what he says in the Arya. I'm jumping. I'm going to read a few lines only. To grow in the fullness of the divine is the true law of human life, and to shape his earthly existence into its image is the meaning of his evolution. This is the fundamental tenet of the philosophy of the Arya. He says something more, then I'm quoting again. The West has laid more emphasis on truth of life, and for a time come to stake its whole existence upon truth of life alone, to deny the existence of spirit, or to relegate it to the domain of the unknown and unknowable. From that exaggeration, it is now beginning to return. The East has laid more emphasis on truth of the spirit, and for a time came, at least in India, to stake its whole existence upon this truth alone and to neglect the possibilities of life, or to limit it to a narrow development or a fixed status. The East, too, is beginning to return from this exaggeration. So the Arya is a great synthesis, the first truly complex synthesis of all the great ideas from the West and all the great ideas from the East. If you notice, in the Arya, he stops speaking about Sanatan Dharma. In the Uttarpara speech, where he is still, he has come out of prison, he is still Sri Aurobindo is always Sri Aurobindo. It's beautiful, whatever he says. But he changes his vocabulary. In the Arya, he does not speak about India alone. It's always a synthesis of the greatest ideas wherever they appeared. There is no exclusivity possible in Sri Aurobindo and Mother, and that's the standard we should be following in Auroville too. No exclusivity. Who then is the Arya? This is again something he writes in the Arya. We are all Aryas. Whoever makes that choice, whoever seeks to climb from level to level up the hill of the divine, fearing nothing, deterred by no retardation or defeat, shrinking from no vastness because it is too vast for his intelligence, no height because it is too high for his spirit, no greatness because it is too great for his force and courage. He is the Aryan, the divine fighter and victor, the noble man, Aristos, best, the Shresht of the Gita. Self-perfection is the aim of his self-conquest. Therefore, what he conquers, he does not destroy, but ennobles and fulfills. He knows that the body, life, and mind are given him in order to attain to something higher than they. Therefore, they must be transcended and overcome, their limitation denied, the absorption of their gratifications rejected. But he knows also that the highest is something which is no nullity in the world, but increasingly expresses itself here. A divine will, a divine consciousness, divine love, divine beatitude, which pours itself out when found through the terms of the lowest life on the finder and on all in his environment that is capable of receiving it. Of that, he is the servant, lover, seeker. When it is attained, he pours it forth in love, in works, love, joy, and knowledge upon mankind. For always the Aryan is a worker and a warrior. He spares himself no labor of mind or body, whether to seek the highest or to serve it. He avoids no difficulty. He accepts no cessation from fatigue. Always he fights for the coming of that kingdom within him and in the world. I mean, this could be our creed, our seeking, our manifestation in Aurobindo. Page 6. Maybe I don't read you what I've put in the journal. Yeah? Because otherwise I'll be spending a long time. I was planning to read you the difference, because what I'm trying to find out is the difference between what Sri Aurobindo is saying and what everyone else has said so far. His yoga is new. He says, my yoga is not new in every way. It's new in its aim. It's new in its standpoint, and it's new in the totality of its method. So if we want to make sense of what Sri Aurobindo is saying, we have to look at what is the aim of this yoga, what is its standpoint, and what is the totality of its method. So the aim is transmutation of life. The aim is a dynamic transmutation of life. It's not a withdrawal from life. You do not need Sri Aurobindo's yoga to find yourself. The other yogas are perfectly able to do that. You can find the self, you can withdraw, you can step behind, you can step within. You do not need Sri Aurobindo's yoga. Sri Aurobindo's yoga, so please be aware of what you're signing up for. You're signing up for transmutation of the earth consciousness, not only yours. You change your consciousness and contribute to the earth. And you are a nobody, you're a nothing, because Sri Aurobindo, in one of his letters, we'll come to it later and I'll read that to you. He says incarnation is not the aim. And even the saint and the yogin is stuck down in the inconscient. Mother says, I have been working from at one point Satprem asks her, he says, why can't you change something she's trying to change? Why can't you change it from above? And she says, Mopiti, I've been working from above, from God knows when, 80 years. It doesn't change anything. You have to go down. You have to go down into the inconscient. And inconscient is terrestrial. We are all the same in the inconscient. Unless we change everything, we've changed nothing. So let's be clear about that. Nobody can claim to be anybody. I am no expert. I am only sharing the joy as a student of Sri Aurobindo, of what I discover when I read Sri Aurobindo. So we'll go on to the next page. He's telling you why he calls his yoga a yoga of transformation. And so I'm going to be reading, and you can read it on top if you wish to. By transformation, I do not mean some change of the nature. I do not mean, for instance, sainthood or ethical perfection or yogic siddhis like the tantrics, or a transcendental Chinmaya body. I use transformation in a special sense, a change of consciousness, radical and complete, and of a certain specific kind, which is so conceived as to bring about a strong and assured step forward in the spiritual evolution of the being, an advance of a greater and higher kind, and of a larger sweep and completeness than the smaller, and this he's calling smaller, than the smaller, the decisive achievement of emerging consciousness when a mentalized being first appeared in the vital and material animal world. This is when we appeared, and he's calling that small. So the next step is way larger than that. If anything short of that takes place, or at least if a real beginning is not made on that basis, a fundamental progress towards this fulfillment, then my object is not accomplished. A partial realization, something mixed and inconclusive, does not meet the demand I make on life and yoga. Then he tells you in a few points why his yoga is new. And I invite you to read that if you wish to. Listen, we can send the PDF versions for anybody who wants. You just have to give your name, put it down, put your email, and Shilpa will send it to you. I think we should read what Sri Aurobindo has to say. We go on? Matter. Their matter is the spirit's firm density, an artistry of glad outwardness of self. Their substance was a resonant harp of self, a net for the constant lightnings of the spirit. When you read Savitri, your whole body vibrates with this dream world, matter, responsive in this manner. How wonderful. I think Sri Aurobindo spoils you for anything else. If you truly pay attention to what he's dreaming into being in Savitri, and in Savitri he really puts all these dreams for what should have happened thousands of years in the future. His dream is here now, ihaiva, down here, in matter. And matter as the spirit's firm density, no spiritual leader up till Sri Aurobindo has ever made that claim. Sri Aurobindo does. And it's the basis of his yoga. And therefore, when he goes to the Veda and the Upanishad, because that secret is contained in the Veda and the Upanishad. So if Auroville is linked to anything in our past, in human past, it is to the Upanishadic quest. It is to the Vedic quest, which is a little bit secret. Sri Aurobindo talks about the secret of the Veda. So this is not something that we can just look at superficially. We have to dwell upon it. We have to meditate. Veda and Upanishad is Shruti. It is not Smriti. Even the Bhagavad Gita is Smriti literature. It's that which is remembered. And Indian thought has given a different status to that which is heard. Sights, sound waves, breaking from the soul's great deeps. The Veda, the Upanishad, Sri Aurobindo's mantra in Savitri is that. Sound waves that you see, the drashta, the one who sees, and he brings it into the present. And by bringing it into the present and by bringing it into matter, we have a chance to develop a relationship with these ideas. I find this quite fascinating. Sri Aurobindo doesn't ask us to do this, but this is a program he set for himself. He calls it the 7 fours, Sapta Chatushtaya. And this is a program he set for himself. This is even before he begins to work on the Arya, he's beginning to make his records. These are little diary notes, so it's a little bit, if you go into it, it's a bit confusing because he's just making notes for himself. But however, if you look at all the things he's trying to bring into his body consciousness, it's startling. He doesn't tell us to do so much of that. So in this journal, I have only given you the first one, which he calls the Shanti or the Samatha Chatushtaya. And then he talks about a passive Samatha and an active Samatha. He talks about all the statuses we need to develop to arrive at that. And this yoga doesn't even begin if you do not develop this in your consciousness. So I don't read out all the almost 29 steps that he wants to achieve. I haven't put it in the journal. I've only put the first of the Sapta Chatushtayas. I'm delighted to read this because it sets you a standard that you could spend your whole life trying to achieve, and it would be hard because we live in physical bodies and we have issues with our consciousness, with our psychology. We have to become something else completely, not human anymore, to be able to achieve even step 1. In the Sapta Chatushtaya, if you go to the next page, the Ashram Archives gave me this page, which is his diary notes. So that's how it is. They're torn pieces of paper. And this is actually what I'm quoting. If you pay attention to it, he's talking about titiksha, udasinata. He's talking about all of the things that are there in the Sapta Chatushtaya, number 1. So he says that the Sapta Chatushtaya, the first one, Samata, Shanti, Sukham, Hasyam, Iti Shanti Chatushtaya, which, if I translate, would be Samata is absolute equality, Shanti is peace, Sukham is a sense of well-being, joy, and Hasyam is laughter. And in the synthesis of yoga, there is a paragraph where he refers to this. So this is given to us. There are 4 things he must have. He's talking about the one who is practicing, the sadhak of the integral yoga. First, equality in the most concrete, practical sense of the word. Samatha, freedom from mental, vital, physical preferences, and even acceptance of all God's workings within and around him. Secondly, a firm peace, an absence of all disturbance and trouble. Shanti. Thirdly, a positive inner spiritual happiness and spiritual ease of the natural being, which nothing can lessen. Sukham. Fourthly, a clear joy and laughter of the soul, embracing life and existence. Wow, how are we going to achieve that? Even Mother says this is a bit difficult. Because she quotes this. To be equal is to be infinite and universal. Not to limit oneself, not to bind oneself down to this or that form of the mind and life and its partial preferences and desires. How much of our life is governed by our preference and our desire? Aurobindo is drowning in this problem of preferences. And the thing that Aurobindo needs to do to survive is to be united, because only then can Mother work with us. Not working on preferences of any kind, either direction. My yoga is not for myself, but for the earth consciousness. Again, something we should understand. When people would come to Mother and say, you come to this ashram, you come for peace. She said, no, don't come here. I don't give you peace. You don't get peace here. You get transmutation, and that's painful. There is a line in Savitri, he tore desire out by its bleeding roots. So desire hurts. To tear it out is painful. It's something you do in yourself. Nobody can tell you what to do. But if you pull out desire from your roots, it might hurt. He says, our yoga can succeed only if the external man too changes. That's at the bottom. But that is the most difficult of all things. It is only by a change of the physical nature that it can be done, by a descent of the highest light into the lowest part of the nature. It is here that the struggle is going on. The internal being of most of the sadhaks here, however imperfect still, is still different from that of the ordinary man. But the external still clings to its old ways, manners, habits. Many do not seem to have even awakened to the necessity of the change. It is when this is realized and done that the yoga will produce its full results in the ashram itself and not before. This is a letter in the 30s. Therefore, it's not the mind. Mother says it's the heart that has wings, not the head. I have tried, by the way, in this journal to stay with Sri Aurobindo, because these days, somehow, there's a dehyphenation. People are talking about Sri Aurobindo and don't talk so much about the mother. But they are two-souled and two-bodied for the joy of time. It's one consciousness. We cannot separate the two. And if I have anything that makes sense that I have put myself, it comes from the mother. So I have been guided a little bit in the selection of my words by what Mother remarks sometimes. And I think that's the grace we all have, because Mother makes what Sri Aurobindo is saying and doing incredibly simple. So anything that is complex in Sri Aurobindo, in Mother, she just explains it in very easy, practical terms, because it's all about doing. It's all about living. So you need to, it's like a fifth Veda, everything that Mother has said. Here he says, all else is shadow and flash in mind's bright glass. Mind, hollow mirror in which ignorance sees a splendid figure of its own false self, and dreams it sees a glorious, solid world. Sometimes in Savitri, if you really pay attention to what he's saying, it's so cutting about this mental consciousness that thinks it knows everything. It doesn't. It doesn't know the future, certainly. I love this quote of Sri Aurobindo about life. This is from the synthesis. Life is the field of a divine manifestation not yet completely complete here in life on earth in the body. Ihaiva, as the Upanishad insists. We have to unveil the Godhead here. We must make its transcendent greatness, light and sweetness real to our consciousness. Here possess and as far as may be express it. Life then we must accept in our yoga in order to utterly transmute it. We are forbidden to shrink from the difficulties that this acceptance may add to our struggle. Our compensation is that even if the path is more rugged, the effort more complex and bafflingly arduous, yet after a certain point, we gain an immense advantage. For once our minds are reasonably fixed in the central vision and our wills are on the whole converted to the single pursuit, life becomes our helper, intent, vigilant, integrally conscious. We can take every detail of its forms and every incident of its movements as food for the sacrificial fire within us. Victorious in the struggle, we can compel Earth herself to be an aid towards our perfection. And this is delightful. And enrich our realization with the booty torn from the powers that oppose us. So we have to snatch life back from the powers that oppose. And Mother's standard for that is no exclusivity. I want everything that life allows to be present because it has to be worked through. It's not a moral consciousness that Auroville needs. It's a spiritual consciousness. And morality and spirituality have almost nothing to do with each other. Mother was reeling against some of the so-called moral dharmic positions that people were taking in the ashram. Periodically, she says, I just don't understand this. Because her standards are different. They're spiritual. And there's room for everything in that. This journal is really a collective effort. The artists who give me their pictures, the photographers who give their photographs, and Christine and the Auroville Press team. She really puts her heart into selecting what she wants to put against which text. So she spends hours selecting. And if you look at this, that picture is actually gray stones. And she sent the fire of aspiration through the stones. And in a sense, it's kind of the psychic fire that transmutes matter, which is just the first step. Here, Sri Aurobindo is telling you that there is no perfect technique in this yoga. You cannot take a man, he says, by a little bit of him somewhere, attach a hook and pull him up by a pulley into nirvana or paradise. The technique of a world-changing yoga has to be as multiform, sinuous, patient, all including as the world itself. If it does not deal with all the difficulties or possibilities and carefully deal with each necessary element, has it any chance of success? And can a perfect technique, which everybody can understand, do that? It is not like writing a small poem in a fixed meter with a limited number of modulations. If you take the poem simile, it is the Mahabharata of a Mahabharata that has to be done. Mahabharata has 100,000 verses. Sri Aurobindo Savitri doesn't have that many. A triple transformation. So therefore, the psychic transmutation is merely the first step. It just sorts your nature out. It restores the white light of the divine into the external consciousness, which breaks up the light into its prismatic personality hues. Because, by the way, all personality, all that we think is ourselves and our wanted opinions, is a creation of nature force. It is not who we are. Soul doesn't have personality. It's a person, it's a being. So we have to shift the energy from the external nature personality to the inner soul person. And that is the first step. And that, Sri Aurobindo says, is not enough. Because, yes, the psychic is the shortcut. If there is a shortcut, it's the psychic. Because the psychic restores the white. The psychic is a being of harmony, mutuality, inclusiveness. The psychic will not exclude. But the psychic doesn't know the truth of the universe. The next transformation is to become universalized. And only when you're universalized that you can begin Sri Aurobindo's yoga. So there is a remark, he says, my yoga begins where others end. So in a sense, we haven't started Sri Aurobindo's yoga yet. We are just kind of looking at it and saying, oh my, thank you for choosing us. Thank you for having us here. Because it's immensely grateful we should be to be part of this program that leaps into the future. This is an interesting remark, he says. Somebody writes to him, you know, in India, all yogas end with some sort of a siddhi. And Sri Aurobindo in his Yoga of Divine Perfection, the fourth book of the synthesis, talks about siddhi. But it's not the aim of the yoga. It's a consequence. It's a condition that helps you to take the next step. Here in this letter, I don't know who is written to him, he says, incarnation is not the object of this yoga. It's only a condition and a means of the object. The one and only aim we have before us is to bring down the supramental consciousness and the supramental truth into the world. The truth and nothing but the truth is our aim. And if we cannot embody the truth, 100 incarnations do not matter. But to bring down the true supramental, to escape from all mental mixture is not an easy matter. And then, you know, you have the chakras and there are 7 centers. So here he's talking about the mere descent of the suns into the centers, even of all the 7 suns into the 7 centers, is only the seed. It is not the thing itself done and finished. So I won't read the whole letter, but he is warning us that please do not assume you have reached anywhere. Be humble, be simple, be a laborer. This is a sentence from Savitri, a laborer in the quarries of the gods. And that's wonderful to be that. We come to the point. From the very beginning, in 1918, he's talking about a collective yoga. So from the very beginning, this yoga can succeed not if only an individual or 2 individuals, these 2 souls did that. They have done the work in their consciousness, but it's not enough. To change earth consciousness, we need a collectivity. So from the very beginning, the necessity of creating a Deva Sangha. Sri Aurobindo is talking about a Deva Sangha, a conscious collectivity, a collectivity that's dedicated to bringing God down into the earth consciousness. That's always been there from the beginning. So there are certain rules and standards of a collective yoga. And that's the aim of this yoga. And this is, I recommend everyone reads this. Mother has pulled it out and she's telling the people in the ashram, read this. We're all like that. We're all like that. None of us is free of it. So I'm not going to read it to you because I don't want to take too much time. I will read the Savitri at the bottom. I love Savitri because he manages to say in simple words, incredible things. This is what has been happening up to now in all yogic processes. I looked upon the world and missed the self. And when I found the self, I lost the world. My other selves I lost and the body of God. The link of the finite with the infinite. The bridge between the appearance and the truth. This goes on. I've just selected Next page. This one I want to read to you. Why is it that everybody who comes to Sri Aurobindo and Mother's Yoga looks so ordinary? This is a complaint people make, that everyone who comes to this place, they're not doing anything very much for the world. Sri Aurobindo says, and I'm going to read both the quotes, I may say that it is far from my purpose to propagate any religion, new or old, for humanity in the future. A way to be opened that is still blocked, not a religion to be founded, is my conception of the matter. The Supreme Court has passed judgment, fantastic judgment, saying Sri Aurobindo does not represent a religion. 150 years after his birth, we should make sure we don't turn him into a religion. It is equally ignorant and 1,000 miles away from my teaching to find it in your relations with human beings or the nobility of the human character or any idea that we are here to establish mental and moral and social truth and justice on human and egoistic lines. I have never promised to do anything of the kind. Human nature is made up of imperfections. Even its righteousness and virtue are pretensions, imperfections, and prancings of self-approbatory egoism. What is aimed at by us is a spiritual truth as the basis of life, the first words of which are surrender and union with the divine and the transcendence of the ego. So long as that basis is not established, a sadhak is only an ignorant and imperfect human being struggling with the evils of the lower nature. There is a remark in the agenda where she says one must know how to stand in the light of the Supreme Consciousness without casting a shadow. The ego is the shadow. The shadow is not outside. The shadow is this way. It's inside. Until we've got rid of, Sri Aurobindo talks about master knots, and one of those master knots, not as in a tied knot, one of those master knots is the ego. And unless we have transformed the ego, and we can't do it as long as because spiritual egos are the most dangerous. Be very careful of spiritual egos, because they think they know and they tell the world what to do. Sri Aurobindo does not. So we have to be super careful. And if you look at Mother's messages in the last few years of Aurobindo, two things that repeat themselves. We are here for a race without ego. Humanity is not the last rung. We need to go beyond that. And for that, we have to get rid of the ego. And the other thing is never tell lies. I can't work with you if you tell a lie. The supramental is a truth consciousness. It will not permit what is not like it. Even the least lie takes us out of that consciousness. It's interesting. I wanted to use this because Mother uses it. And then I was in contact with the ashram archives. And I wrote to Bob and I said, I've gone through all the collected works of Sri Aurobindo and I don't find this in any way. I've gone mad looking for it. And he says, we missed it. We're going to put it in the supplement. And I find this such an important remark in today's world. So we are talking about the two collectivities. Just to say one thing about them. Both Mother and Sri Aurobindo have said this, that the creation of first the ashram and then Auroville has not depended on selecting people. It's been created and life has answered. So those who have turned up are here because life has selected them to be here. If they choose to be here permanently, they represent sometimes a difficulty, sometimes an impossibility, sometimes a possibility. You have to figure out what you represent. If you spend your time in opposition to everyone else, sorry, you are a problem. You need to be in harmony with yourself and with the world around you. It is essential that we find harmony. Mother says, harmony is my aim, and all that leads to harmony makes me happy. Sri Aurobindo in the Life Divine, second page, he says, all problems of existence are problems of harmony. So we should be absolutely, collectively aiming for harmony. Anything short of that takes us out of the Auroville consciousness. So we go to the next page. Because each being there is a member of the self, a portion of the million-thoughted all, a claimant to the timeless unity, the many sweetness, the joy of difference, edged with the intimacy of the one. We don't realize it, we share a oneness. Whether we like it or not, we cannot move exclusively. Life will not permit us to do that. We have to. We'll stand still. Whatever we may be doing externally, we will stand still unless we find that collective unity. Because that's the standard that Mother and Sri Aurobindo have asked for their yoga. And I don't know what anyone else is here for. I'm here for their yoga. And that is what I want to serve. That is what I wish to serve. We go to the next page. Yes, time. I am not going to read so much, but there is a sunlit path. B brought out a book recently about the sunlit path. And Sri Aurobindo says, yes, there are happy ways near to God's sun. So we have the choice of following the sunlit path. Only the pure in soul can walk in the light, he says. So there is a sunlit path. There is, and I wanted to end with that. I want to stay with my time. We said we'll stop at 6. I will just spill over a little bit. Right at the end, book 12 of Savitri. Savitri has rescued Satyavan from death, and she's coming back. They're walking back from the forest. Meantime, Dyumatsena, his wife, and everyone else are coming to look for them because they've taken a long time. And so they come, and one person looks at Savitri and says, what's happened to you? You look different. And this is what she says. Awaken to the meaning of my heart, that to feel love and oneness is to live, and this the magic of our golden chain, is all the truth I know or seek, O sage. That to feel love and oneness is to live. If you wish to live the standards that Mother and Sri Aurobindo have given, you have no right to feel less than love and oneness. In the 30s, there are some ashramites who are sitting around with Mother, and they're asking her about, images. And she says, well, Indian civilization does have an image. And that's the consciousness of Radha. So I am going to conclude with Radha's prayer, which is basically the prayer of the psychic being. O thou, she's speaking to Krishna, of course, but here it's to the Godhead of the universe. Radha's prayer. O thou, whom at first sight I knew for the Lord of my being and my God, receive my offering. Thine are all my thoughts, all my emotions, all the sentiments of my heart, all my sensations, all the movements of my life, each cell of my body, each drop of my blood. I am absolutely and altogether thine, thine without reserve. What thou wilt of me, that I shall be. Whether thou choosest for me life or death, happiness or sorrow, pleasure or suffering, all that comes to me from thee will be welcome. Each one of thy gifts will be always for me a gift divine, bringing with it the supreme felicity. When I had come to stay in the ashram, Aster had made this little prayer in a frame and given it to me. I still have it. And it became kind of the mantra, the standard by which to live. Find the consciousness of Radha. That's the consciousness of the psychic being. And sometimes these practical, physical images are very, very helpful to arrive at inner states of consciousness. You have no right to complain. You have to have joy and laughter of the soul, hasyam, sukham. You have to be in this state of well-being all the time. So I want to say that this journal is a prayer. This journal is an invocation to that Auroville which we signed up for, which I think so many of us love, and we have to co-create. Let's do that together. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, dear Deepti, for such a special and insightful sharing, and for capturing the essence of Sri Aurobindo's yoga through this journal. Bhavishyate IV is truly very unique and special publication of Bharat Niwas. It's a gift. Thank you so much. And here is a small token for you from us.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to say that I'm dreaming of the next one, and it wants to be the yoga of self-perfection. So I hope that I can manage that. Thank you.
Thank you.